Okay, so now we've got a few of these plants all around, we can make some more. So in the project, props and plants, we also have this leaf as well. So let's make one of these. So first of all, game object, 3D object, and tree. Now I'm just going to put this into position, so just over here. Game object and align with view, and now obviously we can see that through the game tab there. Let's just make sure that it's currently above the ground or sort of resting on it, if you like. And with the optimized tree selected, we can then obviously come over to our branch group and just make this a lot smaller. We also need to reduce the radius on this as well. And the branch material is once again bark 13. If you don't see that, just type it in your search. Okay, so it's probably a little bit too close at the moment. So if you want to move, obviously you go back to your tree root node. Make sure I'm in a position where I can see what's going on. There we go, that's better. And you'll notice it's kind of like almost slanted at the moment. So if we just click on the branch group, we can see that the crinkliness is pretty much doing that. We can also change the seek sun as well in order to actually rotate it. Okay, I forgot to set my rotations back to 0 when I did the move. There we go. Okay, that's better. So let's now create the material for this leaf 1. So right click, create and material. Now we'll just call it leaf 1. So in the inspector we can now search for this. So leaf 1. And same for the normal map as well. And no reflections on this. Great. So now when we click on the optimized tree, just go back into my game view, we're now going to assign some leaf group to it. So we currently have 1. I'm going to give it around a frequency of about 12. All right, so we get quite a few of them. And it's going to be distribution of world. Okay, the world step, if we go all the way up to the top, obviously we can see that all right at the very top of the branch there. And the perpendicular align, I'm just going to go all the way to 1, so now basically they're just straight like that. Horizontal align, the value that I want for this is about 0.497. Okay, and so let's assign our material, which is leaf 1, and obviously it will turn it into a nature shader. Great. So when I get closer in this view, we can see this is what we currently have. Okay. So now I need to make some changes with a few of these curves and values, etc. So first of all, on the world, on this actual curve, I'm just going to basically change this curve. I'm going to right click and choose edit key, and I've got a few values that I actually want to enter here. So first of all, 0.295 for the value, and the time, I'm going to move this across on the time. For some reason that didn't update. So 0.5 for the time, and the value is going to be 0.295. Okay, and that's basically going to move it all the way down there, so it begins sort of halfway along this time spread. All right, and basically it's at that value. I'm going to right click this one and edit the key. And this one is, the time is 1, but the value is going to be 0.882. Just make sure that's done it. Yep, so we get this slight bit of a curve here. My twirl, you can obviously move these around wherever you want. And my whirled step, I'm actually going to come back down on this one to around 6. Okay, so now you can see that we've got it arranged at different parts of the actual branch itself. The growth scale, what I'm wanting to do with this is actually change some of these values. So right click on this and edit key. Now for this scale, I want this to be 0.67. And for this one, we're going to make this one 0.3. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this handle up so it becomes almost 90 degrees. There we go. So now you can see that they're much bigger on the bottom and not as big on the top. So if you want to kind of scale them along that way, you obviously need to use the curve. For the growth angle, for this one, I'm going to edit these values, so edit key. So the first one is going to be 0.948. Oh, actually, I'm going to go for a minus on this one. So minus 0.948. And the time on this is going to be, oh, okay, for some reason it keeps editing out of this. 0.37 for the time, and the value is it's done it again. Okay, this is really weird. So the time is 0.37. Let me just click off this. That's weird. Okay, 0.37. Click on this. That's better. Minus 0.948. There we go. That's what I wanted. And then on this one, right click and edit key. So this one is going to be 1 on the time and minus 0.376 on the value. Okay, so basically you get this. And just ensure that the handle is straight like that. Okay. So now the growth angle, what I can do on this is actually just drag this up. So notice how they come down a little bit. I'm probably going to keep this about 0.466, and for my growth scale, probably want to come back in a little bit. So this is effectively just controlling these top bits at the moment due to that curve. Okay, so get them to a size that you quite like. Now I want to come back down to my branch groups. At the moment the branch is a little bit too big, so I'm going to shrink this down a bit. The radius, I might just come in a little bit with this. And I just want to see what this looks like through the game view. So we can actually see that we've got this little bit going on here right at the top. It's a little bit weird, I guess. So if I shrink it all the way down, let's see what we get now. So I'm just going to click on this and raise it up. Oh, actually, yeah, I quite like that. That's quite nice, actually. But it's a little bit sticking up a little bit too much, perhaps. So then we can control the growth angle. So we can get it to kind of come out a little bit more. And that growth scale will make those inner leaves kind of just move in or out. Yeah, okay, so I quite like that. At the moment that might be a little bit too big, so what we're going to do is in the hierarchy, as long as we've got our optimized tree selected and you've clicked on the tree root node, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller, around 0.8 on the X and 0.8 on the Z, maybe even 0.7 on the Y. And then it's slightly smaller. It's about roughly the same size as some of those ferns. I'm just going to switch off my shadows temporarily so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to move it into the position of one of these ferns. So as long as you've got it selected, you can now move it close to one of these ferns, perhaps close to one of these trees actually. just to mask the bottom of the tree and see what this looks like. Yeah, so I think that looks quite nice. If I try this out now and I play it, okay, yep, so that kind of looks interesting. It looks like something that you might actually see in a sort of a jungle environment or a forest environment, etc. If you feel it's too big, just work on that scaling. I feel it's probably a little bit too big. So I'm just going to scale this down further, 0.6 by 0.6. Yep, okay, I think that's good. Now you will notice that it's slightly above the ground, so it needs to come down a little bit. So it might be just a good idea just to get yourself into a position where you can actually see the ground, and then we can drag it so that it's pretty much on the ground. And you can obviously rotate as well if you want to. Yeah, okay. Kind of looks like it's growing out of the ground now, that each of those leaves is sort of independently growing out of the ground. And so now it's just a case of putting these around the level. So very much like we've done with the plants and the ferns. So let's change the name of this first of all. Let's just call this, I might just call it Plant 1. All right, creatively titled. Now I might just have just one of them on their own at various bits. If you want to double them up, you can do, you know, like we did with the little trees there. So I might put one over here. So just click on it, Control and D to duplicate, or you can go through the edit. It's entirely up to you. And then it's just a case of moving into position. Double click on it in order to get a little closer, and just double check that it's not floating above the ground or anything. And possibly kind of rotating to match the orientation of the ground. Okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. And I might actually just move it a little bit under there. Okay. And if you want to kind of scale these differently or rotate them around so they're a little bit different, feel free to do so. If you want to double up, so let's say some of them are going to have more in the same location than other ones. So for example, I might bring this one out here a little bit. You can do that in order to add a bit of variety. Now as you can see there, it's floating above the ground. And I might just sort of rotate this a little bit, something like this. So I would say take a bit of time to really lay these out, make them look nice. We do have some more flowers and vegetation that we're going to put in soon, but just put these throughout your levels so that they actually look nice. So there we can see it in our main scene, and we're building up the complexity of this scene as we're going on, so we're adding new elements each time. And then when we finish, we should have a huge amount of kind of detail in this level, and that's what's going to make it look a bit more impressive. Okay, so now you should have a range of these secondary plants around your scene. I've just organised them into a folder. So as you can see, I've got quite a few just spaced out and around, and I put each of those into like a subgroup, and then inside of those I've got around 11 or so plants per group. Okay, just keeps it nice and organised. Now we want to create some smaller flowers and plants, so I've got some more resources for you. This one is leaf 6. Once again, it's in your nature project, in the nature volume 1. However, obviously the leaves are not lined up, so I forget exactly which one it was. I think it might have been leaf 28 or something like that. I'm not sure. It's one of these anyway, but I've basically just lined it up for you, so it makes it, you can use it straight away. So inside of the plants, we're just going to drag these two into here. Okay, once again, it's got transparency, so in the inspector, just make sure alpha is transparency is checked, and set up the normal as well. Oh, that's leaf 1. Leaf 6 should be set to normal map. All right, great. So we're doing something pretty much very, very similar to what we've just done already. So just gonna get myself into a position. I click on my FPS controller. Which way is he looking? I think looking down here. All right. So I want to get the tree positioned in front of the character. Great. So we're just going to create a new tree. So game object, 3D object, and tree. And then game object and align with view. Yep, there we go. We can see it in front of our character. And let's just make sure that is above the ground. Okay, just going to zero out the rotation. And for the actual branch bark type thing, obviously we want to reduce the length. So we want to come way down, and the radius, just make this one pretty small. And once again, the branch material will go with this bark 13. There we go. Okay, so now we're set up. Great. So once again, we need to assign a leaf group. And this time I'm going for around a frequency of 5 on this one. And it's going to be whirled again. Okay, that one's quite a nice kind of a thing. And I want it basically to be right at the top. So I'm just going to go on to 6, and my perpendicular align, I'm going to go with 0.747 maybe. And for my horizontal align, I'm going to go with about 0.61. All right, just so that they're nicely aligned on top. And now we need to create our material. So if you remember, it's just right click, create, and material. This is going to be leaf 6. Let's just search for that, leaf 6. And also the normal as well. And I'm going to switch off reflections. Great. Okay, there we go. All set up. So now we can assign that material on the leaf group. So that's just leaf 6. And it will automatically convert this. Great. Okay, so in the scene view, when we get a little bit closer to this, we can see what this is going to look like. All right, so yeah, quite nice. Now under the material, let me have a look at the leaf material. If you want to play around with the alpha cutoff, that's entirely up to you. Okay, and to get like the look that you're kind of going for. Okay, so I've got some things to change on the curve, so I've got these preset, if you like. So for my whirl, this, I'm going to edit the key. I'm going to begin at 0, 0. And then the second point is just going to be 1, 1. Okay, so that is basically there. Alright, so now I've basically created a nice little curve. You can even use that one, I think that's the same setup there. So for the twirl, just get this just rotated around a little bit, 0.75. For the whirled step, I'm going with 6. And now for my growth scale, I'm going to change a couple of these. So it's going to begin at about 0.67 on the value. And then for the end, I'm going with roughly 1 as the value there. Okay, wow. All right, so it becomes a lot bigger, that's fine. And for my growth scale, I want this to actually come down to around 0.687. In fact, that's actually not doing very much there. But what you would control this with now is basically this, the actual size of it itself. So we get this lined up the way that we want it in a second. In terms of my growth angle, once again, I'm just going to manipulate these. So the first point is going to be a minus value, so 0.915. And then my second value is just going to be 1, 1. Okay, so that's fine. So obviously we've got this nice little curve going on there. My actual growth angle itself is going to be 0.363. Okay, just so that they're slightly like this. Okay, so they're slightly pointing upwards. Okay. So in terms of size, we'll work this out in a second. What I need to do is basically make the length of this way smaller so that it's practically on the ground. I'm going to click on the actual tree itself, and where it says ground offset, I'm just going to move this into the ground so that part of this we won't actually see. We've just got a very, very slight bit sticking up through the ground, which is fine, that's all we need. And now what we have basically is just like a leaf set. So if you take a look at it, that's what we can see in our actual game scene. In fact, I might move the ground offset a little bit more. Yeah, so it's much, much closer to the ground now. And yeah, everything else is good. So let me just see what kind of size I'm getting here at the moment. So overall, not too bad. It might be slightly a little bit too big. So I probably want to reduce the leaf size on those. So that will be under the leaves and the actual size itself. So maybe just something like this might be good. My growth scale is currently not doing anything there. The growth angle, you can obviously just move that up or down depending on what you want. Yeah. And I'm just going to change the scale of this a little bit. So on the X, I'm going to make this around 0.8, and on the Z, I'm going to make this around 0.8 as well. So it should now be a little bit smaller. Yeah, all right, that's good. So they actually do look kind of like real leaves. I think they're sticking up a little bit too much at one side there. So that's obviously the growth angle, isn't it? Let me get them a little bit closer to the ground. Check it out again now. Yeah, that's much better. All right, good. Okay, now we've got this small plant sorted, I think it's time to actually start putting them into the level. Now, instead of having to put all of those throughout the actual level, which would take absolutely ages, we can use the terrain painter in the same way that we did with the trees. We can do that with these as well. So in your project, you will notice that every time you create a tree, it adds it to your project. So that's where our tree is to be found, simply called tree 2. Okay, it really doesn't matter what you call it inside of the prefab, that's just the name of the prefab. You're looking for tree 2. Okay, so if I click on terrain and go to the inspector, under the paint trees, we can now edit trees and add a new tree and search for tree 2. And there it is. All right, you can just double click on this one. You can even give it a little bit of a bend so that when we add wind a little bit later, we'll be able to see it sort of blowing in the wind. So maybe I'll try 1.5 maybe. We can always change that later. Now, in terms of your brush size, you want to try and keep your brush size pretty small. And we're going to experiment with density. So if I just click and drag now, you can see that I can just paint a few of these wherever I want. Yeah, quite a lot of them. They look quite nice. And I'm just going to do a Control Z to undo that. But what I do want is for them to be a little bit more random. Okay, so we've got random height. I'm just going to really come up with the height. And the width, I'm also going to random width. Okay, and I want this quite extreme as well, the width, so that we get a lot of variation. Might also, with the height, have quite a lot of variation as well. We could have some color variation, so I might actually really come up on this one and see what we get. And now when I paint this, can you see you get some light ones and some really dark ones? We're getting big leaves, little leaves, and all sorts of stuff, so they look a little bit more natural. Some are sticking up higher than others. So if we were, for example, to check this out in the game tab, we can now see that they're looking a little bit more natural. They don't all look like exact perfect clones of each other, and we're getting some really large ones and some tiny little ones. All right, that's good, that's good. The only issue with this is it doesn't necessarily do any kind of rotation, so they're all pointing straight up from the actual terrain. So if you're at a really low angle, they kind of look like that, which is, it's sort of weird. They don't necessarily follow the contour of the terrain, but from certain angles they do look really nice. Okay, so yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So if I just click on tree 2 and just make sure that you hold Control and not Shift. So if you hold Shift, you could delete anything like trees and all sorts. Just Control in order to delete just this one plant, and then I can just hold my Control and just click and drag. Ah, that's my original. So let's start putting some of these in then. So for example, around the base of trees, this would be a good area to actually paint some of these. And I might just reduce my density. So I might just put a few around here like this, underneath here. Oh, that one's come through there actually. Just painting in a few, just looking for small details. And it's just randomly kind of assigning just sort of a range of them to make them look nice. Anywhere where you've got like bases of trees, you can actually just hide the bases by using these, which is quite a nice technique. Sometimes you might want to really lay them on quite thick in certain areas. and even in these darker areas. And if you can't see, just switch off your light so that you hide the shadows. But I kind of want to see what areas are in shadow so I know exactly how much to put in there. So it seems that if you're in a lighter area you want more detail since you can see more. Perhaps around the edges of rocks as well. These are quite nice places to put a few of these. Where we can see the actual rock itself going into the ground, we can just sort of hide these a little bit by putting in a few of these flowers. Okay, so we've got a few little details going on there. Let's just see what it looks like through the game tab. So I'm going to go this way around. So then you can just see you've got some detail basically. It's starting to bring it to life. Whoa, did you see that? I'm going down to 42 frames per second, trying to render 9.3 million. I'm thinking that's related to trees in the background. I'm thinking I've got way too many trees. Okay, because if I'm looking this way, I'm still doing all right. You know, I've got about 5 million triangles, 150 something frames per second. But I think I've just got too many trees in my scene, and that's the issue. And obviously these plants are really kind of basics. They're not complex objects. Yeah, okay, so that's quite nice as a start. So we've got a few variations of these plants hanging around. Now what we need is more details. Okay, so in this particular scene we can start adding extra details, one of which is in your project. In the props we have a fallen tree barrier. So if I just check out in the prefabs, we've got this really nice kind of tree, fallen tree. I'm not too keen on the grass at the moment. I don't necessarily want that, even though I like the grass, it looks fantastic. I've not got any grass in my scene, so I don't want to sort of have a bit of grass just around these trees and nowhere else, since that's kind of a bit of a giveaway that it's a prop. So what I'm going to do is go into hierarchy, and I'm just going to click grass and soil base, and then in the inspector I can then switch those off, just so that we're left with basically just the tree itself. Alright, and it is quite nice. You can put like, you know, maybe a couple of these in, just make sure that you rotate them so that they're not so obvious that it's another clone. Each time I'm just gonna uncheck that. Okay, so in the hierarchy, just make sure you clicked on log 1, and then obviously I can possibly just kind of rotate this around like this, maybe. Just have it sort of pointed around like that. Yeah, that'd be quite nice, I think. Also, we've got loads more rocks, so let's use some of these. So inside of the project, inside of props, we have obviously our rocks and boulders, rocks, and our prefabs. We've got a ton of these, haven't we? So let's bring a few of these in. And obviously I can just rotate these and then bring them down into the ground, and then Yep, so it just fills up a little bit of space basically. You can even use like smaller groups, so there's like these little groups here. They're a little bit angular, these ones, but you know, they nicely fit into place. So perhaps this big space here, we might be able to bring something like this in. Whoa, that's gigantic. So you can scale these down. And that's quite nice. And just obviously check it from various angles, see what it kind of looks like. But yeah, overall that's pretty nice actually. Even just like little areas like this, you could probably bring in something like this, yeah. And just have various kind of rocks sitting around. Feel free to put in more ferns and more of these kind of plants as well, and just sort of populate your scene basically. I'm going to show you how to get ivy working in your scene. That's going to be in the next video. We're going to cover a lot of these trees in ivy and get ivy growing along the ground as well. So I probably wouldn't do too much in your scene at the moment, other than laying out a few little props here and there, seeing what they look like. So in the game scene, we've obviously got this nice sort of fallen tree barrier. We've got a few extra rocks going in there now that need a few like little plants on the edges just to hide where they go into the ground, to make sure they're not too straight and angular. We can incorporate some ivy into our scene that's going to add an extra level of detail. This is a really great little application that an independent developer has actually created. You will need to go online in order to download this. So it's available via the GitHub, and it's a user called Radiator Yang, and the package is called Hedera, which is a type of ivy, and it paints 3D ivy in the Unity editor. So it's procedurally generated meshes that grow. It's really, really great. I definitely recommend this. Completely free. You can either type in this address, which I'll put in a what they call it, in an article in the next session, so that you can just click directly on the link, or you can type it in yourself, or you can go into Google and just type Radiator Yang /Hedera, and it will take you straight there. Now you don't need to clone or download this. If you just scroll down a little bit, you've got the download latest Unity package from releases and the usage. So if we just click this, and we're just going to click and download this one. Okay, so it will come in as a .unity package. Alright, but I've actually already got this one, so it's just on my desktop. So you just click on the package itself and it will decompress, and then you can just import that directly into Unity. Okay, just give that a few seconds. It always says this. I made a backup, go ahead. It's perfectly fine. It's not going to damage your project or anything like that. Okay, so now it's installed. So we find that we've got a folder called Hedera. You've got like a license agreement and a little bit of a README, and then all the stuff in there. Okay. You would normally work with Hedera through the drop down. You've got various things. For example, you can even export the selected game objects to an OBJ file and then re-import it back in if you wanted, or you could take it through to like 3D Studio and continue to manipulate it there. It's entirely up to you. The way that you work this is you go to Create and you create new IV game object. Okay, and that will, in your hierarchy, give you an IV group. When you click on this, inside of your inspector, it will then open up a dialog box, etc. Now you do need an Ivy profile asset, so this will basically store all of the data and the presets that you use. There are, if you just click on this, there are some presets that you can also use, for example realistic or cartoony or cable wire, etc. So cable wire is quite good actually, because there's no Ivy on it, it's just basically wires, and that can be quite useful. but we're just going to create our own new Ivy profile asset. I'm just going to put it inside of Adera and just save this. So once you've done this, it then comes up with a bunch of sliders, similar, I guess, in a way to the tree creator, in that it's completely procedural. You'll also notice that it doesn't have all the settings shown by default, so if you click on all these, you get loads and loads of detail, extra sliders. I'm just going to work with the basics, basically. We are going to get into modifying some of these shortly. First of all, we're going to start painting Ivy. That's all you have to do. You just click Start Painting Ivy. Now, the way that this works, it looks for any object that has a collider. So, for example, a terrain has a very good collider that follows the actual contours of the terrain. This tree, not such a good collider. It's actually a box collider. So if it grows around that, it'll actually grow around in a box style fashion. Some of these rocks have very close colliders, so they're quite good. Now we'll find out that the trees, although they have colliders, Adera is not going to recognize those. So first of all, I'm just going to grow some ivy on the ground. So the way that this works, you click Start Painting Ivy, and then you can see a little thing. I'm just moving my mouse around, not clicking anything. So that shows you what you can paint it on, and it's showing you where all the colliders are. And obviously it can follow any kind of colliders. Well, I'm just going to paint, so click and drag. In order to start painting, I'm going to go around like this, and then it will basically simulate. Okay, kind of fun. It's like something out of Swamp Thing, you know, it's just growing itself. And then basically it has now grown. You've got an Ivy asset. Now if I want a second one, I can also do that. I can just start growing, and once again it'll give me a simulation based on these settings, which you can change later. Got a second Ivy asset. If you want it to only be small, you could just, like, for example, just click like that, and it randomly grows from that point. Okay, once you're done and you're quite happy with your Ivy at the moment, you just click Stop Painting Ivy, and it gives you your controls back, so you can now move around your scene. So if I now click off this, this is basically the Ivy that is now basically grown into our scene. And you will notice that they have a slight rotation on them, as though it's being affected by wind, which is quite nice. So through the game port, we can now see what this Ivy would look like on the ground. And as I say, it's completely procedural, so it's actually pretty good. So we're going to make a few changes. We're going to get it to grow up trees and things like that along the ground, maybe over a few of these, over some of the rocks and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so this is definitely an asset you're going to be using time and time again. Okay, so that was just an example. So let's say I didn't want Ivy and I want to get rid of it. Well, we've got all the things in the Ivy group, you know, so you can actually select individual bits of Ivy and you can actually move them around if you want, or scale them up, scale them down. You can even break them down into branches and leaves. So for example, if I were to switch off the leaves, I've just got the branches left. And if you wanted that, you could. All right, which are quite nice. They're almost like roots. Or alternatively, I could switch the roots off and just have the leaves, if you wanted that, for example. So you can delete them from there, but what is probably a better idea is to click on the Ivy group in the inspector. You can see next to each Ivy branch, you've got a little dustbin, trash can type thing. So you can just click on those to delete them. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is basically get a bit of Ivy to grow up this tree. Now, if I click Start Painting Ivy, you will notice that my little blue thing doesn't recognize this tree. So it only recognizes the terrain, which is annoying. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do is basically create a 3D object and just put it into the same position as the tree. So it's a little bit of work, unfortunately. So we're going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and Capsule. since that's roughly about the same shape as the tree. And we're just going to get roughly into the same position as the tree. Game object and align with view. So now it's roughly in the same position. Inspector, and we're just going to zero out all of our rotation. And then it's a case of just moving it into the position of the tree. Now you want it relatively close, but you want it extending a little bit outside of the tree. Not by too much, otherwise your ivy will be floating. Yeah, it's not so bad, isn't it? Okay, so now it's basically just a case of extending it as high as you want the ivy to go. So I'm now going to scale it up, and then I can move this up. So let's say I wanted my ivy to climb sort of up there like that. Yep, okay, so I think I'm quite happy with that. And obviously you can just switch off your mesh renderer so you don't see it. Now we can see toward the top there that the collider is not matching the tree itself. So what I might actually do on this capsule is actually just shrink it down a bit and only get the ivy to sort of go up to about this point. In fact, it's kind of weird because the tree sort of like, you know, it's not perfectly straight, is it? So it can be quite difficult. I mean, we could easily bring another tree in and switch the tree off and just have the collider working that way, but it's not advisable. You don't want loads and loads of collider data in your scene. Yeah, I'm going to work, I think, like that. I'm going to see how that works. So, in the hierarchy then, with the ivy group selected, I can now probably change a few of these to begin with. The length of it is basically how long does it grow. So if you want it shorter, you'll obviously come down there. If you want it longer, you'll go up this way. And if you hover over any of these, it will actually tell you what to expect. The branch chance is obviously how much will it actually branch out. 25 is the default. I'm just going to extend this, 40 maybe. And the random spread is how far will it go as an area. So I'm just going to extend this to about 150. There we go. The branch thickness, I'm going to make it slightly thicker to about 0.1. 0.101, okay. And the leaf size, I actually want that to be a bit bigger. So I'm going to go up to 0.3. Might be easier just to type these values actually. Leaf density, as a percentage, 50. I'm going to increase this a little bit to maybe 65. And the vertex colours are what are colouring the variety of these leaves. I'm not very keen on the vertex colours, so I'm going to switch those off and just have them using these textures. Okay, so what I want to do is start painting my ivy, and I'm going to paint it on this tree. So I'm going to sort of get it to go up to there, and now it's going to start to populate it. If at any point you want that to stop, there's a simulate where you can stop it simulating. Stop painting my ivy, and now you can see that I've got a lot of ivy going on. The leaves are a lot bigger, it looks pretty interesting, and they're even cascading down to the floor. It's even going as high as this, which is pretty cool. So let's see what this looks like through the game scene. Yeah, that looks quite nice, I think. And notice how much better the colours look without those vertex colours. I think that kind of does look like good ivy. Yeah, Great. Now obviously you don't want all of your trees covered in ivy, but you want some of them covered in ivy because that gives you a lot of interesting kind of detail going on there. It just makes it look a little bit more authentic and real. So I'm just going to press escape and come out of this. So maybe I also want a little bit of ivy coming over this tree. So what I'm going to do here, oh, by the way, once you've actually grown your ivy, this capsule doesn't matter anymore. Okay, so you don't need to keep that capsule in there. But I am going to keep the capsule, so I'm going to use it again for other trees. But the ivy is not necessary. It doesn't rely on this capsule. That was just simply so it knew where to grow. Once it's grown, it's actually generated it, and that's perfectly fine. So what I'm now going to do is basically create something on this tree whereby the ivy can actually go over it. So first of all, I've got to find the actual log. Which one is it? It's this one. And we've got, oh, it's level of detail. So if I click on the log, you'll notice it doesn't have a box collider or anything. But if I click on the level of detail 0, it still doesn't have a collider. I wonder if the collider is just on the prefab itself. Let me have a look. It is. Yep, there's the green box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch off the box collider. As long as it's switched off, the ivy will not basically react to it. So what I'm going to do is click Game Object, 3D Object, and I might just have a cylinder this time. No, I'm going to go for a capsule again. Roughly in line with the tree, and then Game Object and align with View. Okay, so it's now just a case of lining this up. So 0, 0, 0 on my rotation, and obviously now I can hand rotate it. So we're going to get it to go this way this time, and down into the ground. Might just get it to go over that bit, just there. Yeah, looking pretty good. So I'm just going to extend this out just a little bit. And then I can pull it this way. Excellent. Okay. So obviously now I need to stretch it out. Otherwise it'll be growing through the tree, which we don't want. It might have been better to have used a cylinder, I think. Let me change from capsule to cylinder. Yeah, okay, but it's still using the capsule collider. Okay, so let me remove the capsule collider, go to component, physics, and okay, the only collider we've got, perhaps a mesh collider. Can I use that? Mesh is the cylinder. See if it's matching it up or not. Doesn't look like it. Oh, it is, yeah. All right, as I say, it really doesn't matter about like the amount of polygons and vertices and all the rest of it, because we're going to be getting rid of this collider anyway. It's only so that the ivy knows where it can grow. So I'm going to be getting it to grow from one side over the tree to the other side. Okay, so I might start from about here and get it to grow over there. So I need to get into a position where I can see all of the area that I need to grow. So we'll go back to our ivy group. All right, we're going to be using the same group numerous times, and each time it's just going to create a new ivy object. So same settings. I'm going to click Start Painting Ivy, and I'm going to start here. I'm going to come along here, up and over, and then around here. Now just leave it to grow. Is it going to grow? I think it is, but it's because, well, let me just paint another bit then. There we go, now it's growing. It's growing a lot. Okay, yeah, wow, probably too much, but yeah, okay, and then stop painting ivy. If at any point you feel that it has sort of created too much ivy, then obviously you can just delete that and do it again. Actually, I quite like the ground cover there. So now it looks like that tree is sort of immersed inside of the ivy. Now we can go over to our capsule 1 and just delete that. We don't need any more. So let's see what this looks like through the game scene. Yep, so now we've got a nice bit of ivy sort of coming over that tree and all the way over there. It just makes it look a little bit more natural and realistic looking. Yeah, I quite like that. And the shadows are really nice as well, so that's all working pretty good. Let's see what it looks like if we want to paint some ivy on, like, let's say some rocks. Let's see how well it does with that. So I'm just going to come out of this, back into my scene. So if I now click one of these rocks, we can see that it's got really good mesh collider on it, so that should be perfectly fine. So if I go back to my ivy group, I'm probably creating way too much ivy, so that would actually cover these rocks, which I don't want. So what I want there is basically the leaf density to come down to like maybe about 25. Was 25 the default? Default is 50, so that's half of the default, so quarter of what we had before. Leaf size radius was pretty good. The branch thickness I was happy with. The length of this, I'm gonna bring it in so it's not quite as long. And the branch chance, I'm going to bring this down to about 20, so there's not as much branch chance. And the random spread, I'm going to bring this down to about 35, so it's less random. Ooh, the default's 100 actually, so let me bring that up to about 65. And everything else should be good. Alright, so start painting. I'm going to start from the ground, and I'm going to come up this and maybe down here like this. So let it start growing. Okay, it looks like it's done. So stop painting the ivy, and let's now take a look. So yeah, we've got little bits of ivy just growing up and around this. So not a massive amount, but just enough to make it look like it's actually part of the scene. Yeah, all right, so experiment with different values. And whenever you want, let's say, another tree to have a bunch of ivy, let me do this one actually. So now it's just a case of finding that capsule that we switched off. So let me put it back on. I'm going to put the mesh renderer back on so that I can see it. And it's now just a case of bringing this into position. Just check it from all sides to make sure it looks okay. Yep, I think that'll be pretty good. So I'm just going to switch off my mesh renderer so that I can see what I'm working with. Let's go back to the ivy group again. In fact, you can just close that down, it might make it easier. And I want to change these values again, so I'm just going to come up a little bit. My branch chance back up to about 40, my random spread to about 150, and the leaf density I'm going to come to about 75. The default was 50. Yep. So let's see what we get now. So I'm going to start painting my ivy actually on the ground this time, and then get it to come up the tree to about there. And obviously now it grows on the ground as well as up the tree as well. Yep, great. And then stop painting ivy. If for any reason it's crashing your computer, or your computer is running really slow, you can click this make mesh during painting growth. You can uncheck that, and all you'll see is basically just the blue lines. And then when you're done with that, what you have to do is click remesh visible, I believe. It remakes the mesh for all visible ivy at once, so you can actually see what you've got. Merge visible will basically just merge all of those into one piece. Now we don't want to do that yet, but we will eventually do that. So let's see what we've got. Yeah, all right, that's looking nice. There may be little bits where it doesn't quite match up with it, but I don't think anybody's going to be scrutinizing it that close. As long as it's not miles away from the tree, then you should be fine. And once again, let's see what it looks like through the character's eyes. So this is the one that's close up, and we can see the one that's further away over there. Yep, looks good from a distance. And we get a little bit closer. Yep. Okay, that's looking nice. And it's merging in with everything else that we've got. What does it look like from a crazy distance away? I can still see it. I can see it just in the distance there. I'm noticing that my frames per second have gone down dramatically. Not as a result of the ivy, I don't believe. It's a result of all the trees in the background. Find out for sure. What am I on at the moment? I'm on about 22.9 million triangles. Wow. Those trees certainly need sorting out, and we'll do that shortly. In terms of the ivy then, if I'm just looking directly at that, it kind of looks a little weird at the top there where it's coming out, but not too worried about it. Can always just redo the ivy again if I wanted. Just looking at that, I've got about 4.4 million, and a lot of that is going to be the background trees, I think. Yeah, so when I'm really close, it's like, ooh, actually, that's around 9 million. So just be careful how much ivy you put into your scene. Be constantly checking it against the stats. And in fact, what I might do, just to double check this, is go onto the terrain, and in the inspector, come over to the settings, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the draw so all the trees disappear, but we're left with the ivy. And let me now see what kind of frames per second I'm getting. So yep, 260. Kind of looks weird without that. Yep. So just looking at that ivy there, I've got what, about 400,000 going on there, which isn't too bad. Where's the other one? It's over here. 2.4 million for that one. Wow, that's with a lot of the stuff on the ground as well. Yeah, so that has actually eaten quite a bit there. Mind you, it's only 1.2 million there, 885, so maybe it's not. Maybe it's just all of this stuff that I've put on the ground here. But if you take a look at the frames per second, that's actually relatively good. 240, 400 frames per second, yeah. So not so bad. We've got to do a little bit of optimization soon with the background trees, but that's easy enough to do. So I'll put my trees back on. Okay, so now it's over to you. So your task, ready for the next video, is to go through your level and start putting in some ivy and start putting in some of these plants using the terrain. You can obviously paint these using this, and also drop in some props. You've obviously got the fallen tree barrier, you've got more of these ferns. I wouldn't use these trees at the moment, they're not particularly great. You've got some mossy rocks if you want them. You've got the photo scanned rocks that you can use, and obviously you've got all of these rocks as well. So just put in as much detail as you want in order to make it look good. And what I'm thinking of doing actually for the next video is just doing like a speed level design type video, you know, so it'll be really sped up, probably won't have any dialogue on it, and I'll just be showing you how I'm laying stuff out, but feel free to do it any way that you like. So I'm just partway through detailing the level, and I've noticed that I'm suddenly falling below 40 frames per second. So I just want to check where the sort of bottlenecking is coming from. Obviously I'm adding a lot of detail in this, but don't forget it's meant to be like a next-gen system. If you want to compete with the latest games, you've really got to sort of like create these next-gen style visuals. So what I want to do first of all is just go into the actual game scene itself. I'm keeping an eye on my frames per second. So what we can see there is I'm getting like 32 and 33 frames per second. It's telling me I've got about 11 million triangles and massive amount of batching, so 15,000 batches. So what I'm assuming is that it's something to do with like loads and loads of trees. So I just want to put this to the test and check this. So if I go into the scene with the terrain selected, I'm going to go to my inspector and just switch off my draw so there's no more trees, and let me just see what kind of frames per second I'm getting. So yeah, about 260. So I've got 2,000 batches now at the moment, 2 million triangles, which isn't too bad. And yeah, about 400 frames per second, 848 batches. So it's certainly something to do with the trees. So what I'm going to have to do basically is redesign this large area where you've got loads and loads of trees. Not a problem anyway, because obviously it didn't look that great. It's an opportunity to sort of like improve this area at the back anyway. So I'm just going to turn my trees back on again. Just switch off my shadows for now so that I can see what I'm doing. Whoa. And if we take a look at this, I mean, there's a massive amount of trees there. If I change over to my just wireframe, you can see all of those vertices are it's just completely black, isn't it? I mean, your vertices are meant to be like, you know, just a few vertices like this, like just, you know, just a few odd little sections. I mean, those plants that we put down onto the ground, it's just that many vertices, you know, it's not a great deal at all. But these trees are just like really, really heavily detailed. I mean, if I try to get into a position that's like just one tree, you can see how many vertices it's using. So this is the issue really. So go back into shaded again, and it's this large area at the back here. So what I'm going to start doing is basically just erasing some of these trees. So it was the second level of trees, the modified one. So my brush size, I'm just going to become quite big on this. Hold Control and just start painting these out. Don't forget, we can redo a lot of this. It's quite easy to do. Going to do the same with the trees here as well. Just be careful not, mind you, the ones in the middle are a different tree anyway. It's a more high-res tree. Great, and let's do this as well. It's going to look weird for a while because it's obviously now open again, but you know, as I say, it's an opportunity to actually make the scene look a lot better. Okay, so just erase those and I'm still getting around 48 frames per second. Take a look, 90 frames per second, 58, 84. 6759, wow, okay. So there's 5 million there, but it looks like the amount of batches that's causing the issue there. So I wonder if it's these little plants that I've put in. So let me try taking those out. To be honest, they do look quite nice, but there's probably too many of them. And from a certain angle, they don't look very good. So for example, if I'm stood there, it sort of detracts from the scene instead of adding to it. So let me just click on this little tree too, and I'm just going to remove those from the scene. Don't worry, we'll come up with a better system. And now when I play, great, so now I'm back to 130 frames per second, around 2000 batches. Okay, so those little plants, we will put those in, but most likely we'll do them by hand. So we probably had too many of those, and I'm glad that I spotted that before I went through the entire game. Otherwise, you know, I would have had to redo everything all again. The longer you spend doing this, the more, you know, tiresome it can become going through it all again. So this is the reason why you should always kind of like play through what you're doing at each stage, just checking your frames per second, see what's happening with the batches, how many triangles you're getting. I mean, even there, it's like 3 million, 6 million of triangles. That's still quite a lot, isn't it? Okay, so that's sorted out that issue for now. I think in the next video I'm going to replace, where we took those flowers out, I'm going to replace those perhaps with some kind of a grass texture and see how that affects my frames per second. In the next video we're going to start adding a little bit of grass and some extra material into our scene to make it look really good. However, before we do so, if I just play through the game, in terms of optimization, if we take a look at the amount of batches that are taking place there, about 2,700. When I move around, that's not so bad, 282, but there's not a lot in that area. And then over here it's like 2,400 and about 1,600, etc. So we've still got a lot of batches. Now there is a way to actually reduce the amount of batches, which I want to cover in this video, and that is GPU instancing, which can be set up for your materials. So basically what it does, any material that is shared, it will then use that material, whatever is in your RAM already, it will basically reuse that. It won't have to reload it again. So basically it will just batch all the objects that use the same material and just assign it to them. So it will actually speed up your game and reduce the amount of batches and draw calls. Okay, so if we just go into props, we have foliage free and materials, and we have our fern material. If you just click on that, inside of the inspector, we can see that we've got a check mark for enable GPU instancing. Let's switch that on. All right, it will help. And then we also have our mossy rocks. So the materials, let's just take all of those. And we'll make sure that they're switched on for all of those. And I think we've got this for like some of the trees, actually, these little trees. So if we go into bark, we've got material in here, haven't we? Bark 13. Let's just make sure that we're enabling GPU instancing for that. Yeah, I think that's all we used from there, wasn't it? We have our photo scans, mountains, rocks. So inside of materials, just select all of these and enable GPU instancing. And then for our materials that we created, just select those and ensure that enable GPU instancing is on there as well. And then finally for our rocks and boulders, just under rocks and source, and then materials, and then Unity 5, just select all of these and just enable GPU instancing. So now when we check it out, we've got around 1100 batches. All right, so we've saved probably about 1,600, something like that, which is quite a lot, isn't it? So that's pretty good. So every time that we create a material, we will enable GPU instancing. Yep, so it kind of looks weird now with no trees in the background, but don't worry, we will be sorting that out shortly. So in the next video, I'm going to add some grass and get some more details on this ground.